So, in order for me to stop talking so much, I'm gonna let somebody else talk a bit. Yeah, you smiling. I'm about to bring in my sister comrade,
That
Dr. Ife Tayo Ojelade. Is that feedback I'm hearing, sis? What's going on with the mic? What is this? Your laptop? Where your camera at?
It is, but this is the same one I use all the time. I got feedback. Okay, let me hang up and come back.
No,
Hey, y'all.
no, 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 no. Come on, let's go. Let's roll with it.
Okay, but concerned that you have feedback. I'm trying to have feedback. Okay, but anyway, how you doing, sis?
I am doing well. Dr. Ife Tayo Ojelade is a licensed psychologist and licensed professional counselor with an interest in assisting people to heal in order to take their careers and personal lives to the next level. As an expert in trauma recovery, Dr. Ojelade works with healthcare, legal, and safety professionals to manage secondary trauma in the workplace. She also has a particular interest in women leaders of color in high stress roles. Those are her, what they call that, her CV and her bona fides. But that's not how I know her. I know her as my homie, my homegirl from around the way. Grew up in LA and then ran off to Atlanta. I ran to Atlanta, but I ran back to LA. But that's how I know Ife Tayo Ojelade. How are you doing today, sis?
I'm doing good. I see you got on my website and pulled that. I can
How,
always tell when people get the bio information from. Like, oh, okay, that's the site.
how come you couldn't have just ran with that? Why you gotta out me like
No,
that?
that's a good thing. How you doing over there in Tongva territory?
Tongva territory, Tongva land. I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. And I wanted to bring you on because you have brought me on your show. Is it once a month?
It's
We have a
once a month.
roundtable discussion every month where sisters get together. I'm the only one that's a non-professional. They just pick me up and tolerate me because they like me because of my personality. But everybody else are degree professionals. Dr. Ojelade, the psychologist. We have an anthropologist. We have a historian. We have a professor of literature. We have a licensed minister, cultural worker, and I did say
And
historian,
a
right? That's two.
journalist, which is a
And then
professional,
you got me, right? So yeah.
a journalist and an author. But
And
but
we
we're gonna talk about that in terms of gender and how we as sisters, kind of ascribe our put ourselves in these different categories. But we'll talk about that. Go ahead.
okay. Woo, should be so anyway, yeah, this is how we chop it up on various topics once a month. And we've got one tomorrow, I do believe, don't we?
We do. We're gonna talk about the Netflix series "Survival of the Thickest." So looking at Black women from a totally different lens, from a kind of a comedic lens, but really kind of dealing with issues that have to do with our everyday lives. Yeah.
And we need that comedic lens because we need that break every now and then. We need to lighten it up.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into that, let's talk about what just already on my head, Tandy. What do you mean already on my head? Anyway, um, we interact with the folks in the chat here on BPM a lot. So you got to excuse me. I'm going back and forth, back and forth. So, Ifetayo, that presentation that we just heard, I don't know if you were able to catch all of it, but that was Aminata Umoja, who's out that way near you,
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
Decatur, and Asada Shakur talking about revolution without women ain't happening. I believe, I don't know if it was in 79 when she, well, it probably wasn't when she was first broken out of prison, but at some point when Asada would send us messages, she
Was
had
it
said,
79?
well, she was busted out in 79, but this quote of hers, there's a quote where she tells us a revolutionary woman can't have no reactionary man. Say, if he ain't about the struggle, if he ain't about liberation, he ain't about nothing. So I wanted to bring you on and round out this discussion. We're talking about revolution without women ain't happening. So I wanted to get your perspective as one of my sister colleagues who I chop it up with regularly.
Yeah, I love this comment on here that I'm already a professional liberator is the most useful type of professionalism. And that I love that. I love that comment. Yeah, all the rest of the stuff doesn't matter. being a psychologist, an anthropologist, being able to write, none of that matters if you're not doing it for the liberation of African people.
Mhm.
This period, point blank. When I think about it, I didn't hear the whole thing, but I heard part of it, and I know Mama Amina and the work that she's doing out here with the Quilombo School, her and her daughter Tashia Umoja, and
Mhm.
so as I was listening, the first thing that came to mind is like we need to, when we think about like gender, these concepts, the Western concepts of gender and biological sex. Actually, before we even go there, let me ask you this, Tandi. Did you start the conversation with a definition of the difference between gender and biological sex?
Not here
Okay.
today. We I thought I broached it last week when we talked with Seema Lee, who's trans masculine, New African comrade, New African anarchist comrade in Baltimore. But go ahead, go ahead.
And I like to do that, and particularly for our new African folks that um, we hear all of these concepts, and then you kind of hear them in different spaces, and like, oh, kind of that's white folks and their ideas and stuff like that. And we need to be able to understand what the language is. So gender, when we look at gender, the argument is that gender is something that is socially constructed, and the reason that
Hmm.
they say it's socially constructed is that not every culture has just two genders. So we think of biological sex, whether you're XX or XY, we think of biological sex as being intertwined with gender, and that's not necessarily true in all cultures. So when I used to teach the psychology of gender, first thing that I would break down to my students, these were undergraduate students, is I would have them read an article, starting out an article and this one, The Invention of Women by Dr. Oronke. And she talks about how in Yoruba culture, there is no such thing as gender. So there is no he and she. Now, there is biological sex of male and female that exists, but the hierarchy in that system pre-colonialism had nothing to do with gender. And then I would show my students that there are cultures where they have like 5 genders or 2 genders or 3 genders, and they would be so confused by that. And my point to them always is this is something that, depending on what community you go to or what culture you go to, people have different ideas of what categories that people fit in. And it has nothing to do whether or not you are XX or XY when you were born. It is more culturally constructed, the things that people think that you should be able to do. So I think we need to start the conversation there. And
Hmm.
then if we start the conversation there, and we go back to the Yoruba people. And I use that as a reference because that's what I talk and write about a lot in terms of my work as a psychologist. Is I'm always thinking about, if you look at the Orisha, so divinities in the indigenous Yoruba spiritual system, it is very different than the way that we understand male and female roles in our society in the West. So, for example, when you look at a divinity like Oshun, people tend to know she's a popular goddess. People think about her in terms of love and sensuality and protecting of women and babies. Those are things that are true, and those are stereotypical things that we think about in terms of women in Western society.
Hmm.
But Oshun is also known as a warrior. So she is the one that is known that she go to war in 2 different ways. She can either come and sing to you and dance and laugh and try to calm down stuff. She can also pull out a sword out of her vagina and cut off your head. She's a warrior. She's also the creator of banking and finance.
Hmm.
She's also considered a leader. So she is a queen mother in the sense that we would think of a queen mother in terms of having a leadership role. That is completely different. When you think of another Orisha, Oya, Oya does two things that I think are important for us to think about that are different than our Western ideas. One
Mm-hmm.
is every single time that her husband, Sean, thunder and lightning, gets ready to come in, Oya is announcing his presence. She brings the wind. So can't nothing happen without that sister showing up first. She's the one that y'all know, yeah, he's behind me. Last thing about Oya. So there's a story about Oya where she was married to Ogun. He tricked her into a marriage, and we can talk about the Orisha and all the problematic things that they did.
Right.
He tricked Oya into a marriage,
Mm.
and she's a shapeshifter, and so she shifts into a buffalo, and he saw her shift from a buffalo to a beautiful woman. He decides he wants to hook up with her. He hides her buffalo skin. He basically keeps her captive for years, and she marries him. And then one day she gets her buffalo skin back.
Mm-hmm.
And Oya decides that when she leaves, she goes after Ogun and she whoops his ass. That's the stories of the Orisha. That's part of our African deep knowledge. Women are not in the sidelines. Women are not like, oh, we need to support the African man and we just need to stand in the background and be silent. When you look at African traditional spiritual systems, when you get deep African thought, African women have always been leaders.